So, hi everyone. Um, it's a pleasure to be invited to the privacy talk. So this time we're gonna very great to be invited Mr. Olivier from Geneva. He works on the international standardization. That's the very important role in the telecommunication space. So Olivier, thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
Thank you. Before jumping into the agenda, I want to share his profile. Olivier Alais is a program coordinator at the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, where he leads work to embed the human rights into technical standardizations. A computer engineer with 2 decades of experience at the intersection of the technology, governance, and human rights, he previously directed the major digital transformation programs for the French development agencies, the World Bank, and the USAID. He also founded his company, Digital Advisory Firms, supporting the strategy, policy, and implementation projects, and has worked on the national digital infrastructure, policy reform, cybersecurity, internet freedom, and the rights-based digital initiatives across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Earlier in his career, he taught computer science at the public university in Burkina Faso, built rural ICT centers across the countries, and launched a network of internet-connected community radio stations and an innovation lab in Mali. A former fellow at the Bachman Crane Center, is currently at the fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Korean Center for Human Rights Policy, focusing on the rights aligned and trustworthy digital governance. So again, it was remarkable to speak with you.
Thanks a
So
lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
yeah, that's very awesome. Yeah, so let's dive into the interview agenda. I was very inspired that you work on the human rights space. I once that we encountered, I was quite so impressed that you working on the standardization projects. So my first question is about your own history and why did you start to work for the intersection of the technology development and human rights? So could you tell us about the history?
Yes, of course. Thanks a lot for the questions. When I guess these questions, just bring me back when I was kid finally. And when I was kid, because my parents were scientists, and so I grown up in a scientist environment. And when I was kid, I was lucky enough to have a computer at home because my father needed to have that computers. And most of my friends at that time, their parents were also scientists. And so I really grown up in this kind of environment. So when I was even 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I was already not that familiar, but we have that computers at home, and I was trying sometime to play with it. And then in the 90s, when the internet started, uh, I did not have the internet directly at home, but my father was using it at his office. And I have some friends that the internet, so I'm talking about 94, 95, 90, 96, so come now, almost 30 years ago. And I was fascinated by the internet. At the beginning, I didn't know how it was working exactly, but I was fascinated by the fact that we can contact anyone in the world, or it was a small world at that time, and 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 just to be able to access a server and to access information. It's in Japan, in the US, in Europe, and so I have this interest for technology. And I remember one time when I was still a teenager, when my dad came back uh, at night to the house, and he was struggling for about 1 month on a specific problem. He was working in the industry, and he came back and said, "Okay, I got a message on a news group on the internet, and a guy from the US gave me the solution that I've been looking for 1 month. And for me, it was wow, it was incredible. So it was really the beginning the beginning of the internet, where the promise was really to share knowledge, to have a small village, and to try to advance a better world together. So for me, this was fascinating. So it was also with a kind of social implications and trying to understand other cultures, and for me it was fascinating, and I started studying computer science in 1998. So I say, okay, it's something interesting to me, and I say, okay, I start to do a bachelor degree in computer science, then an engineering degree or master degree, also in information system. And so here it's really about technology and the development, because I was also lucky enough to travel when I was teenagers. I traveled in Eastern Europe, and also when I was 18, I was lucky enough to travel in Asia, to Bangladesh and Nepal. And for me, it was a shock. It was a really shock, because I just went out of my comfortable life finally in France, and realized that there is other people in the world that don't have the luck that I had to access a computer, to have electricity, to have a comfortable house. And and I remember one time I was in Nepal. I was walking with one of my friends in Nepal, and young Nepalese came to talk to us, and we were talking together. And he said, "Wow, you are in a high school in France. You are very lucky. I had to quit high school to help my parents to work, because they didn't have enough money to pay for my education." And for me, it was one more step to realize how I was lucky and how other people were struggling. And really, and for me, it was really a start from a kind of intolerance from injustice. I said, for me, when I was starting to travel, I say, okay, we have a problem here. Why I can have access to such much wealth and infrastructure, and why other people in other countries we have the same age, and for them it's way more difficult. And so I started also to travel for my work. And I did my first internship, for example, I did two internships in India. And it was a long time ago. It was in 2000, in 2003. And I went to the South India, and to develop specific computer software uh, in India for local company, and I was trying to adapt my software to the computers that they had at that time, and they were pretty old compared to what I had access in Europe, and trying also to give trainings and trying to make the best use of what I was developing and doing in India. At the end of my study, or at the end of my study, also I worked a bit in Canada. I finished my study in Canada, and then I make a bit of money in Canada, and I went traveling for about 1 year in Asia. So I went back to Asia. I went traveling to Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and then Central Asia. And one more time, I really enjoyed this trip. And I was one more time in contact with people that they were asking me a lot about technology, how to access technology, how we can use a computer, how the internet or computer can be useful for them. So for 1 year, uh, I had a lot of questions during that trip. And then when I came back to France, I moved straight away to Africa, to Burkina Faso and Mali. And in Burkina Faso, I was working in a small public university, and I was teaching computer science. Um, in a university, the first year, we did not have the internet. So I was training engineers in computer science without the internet because it was not working. It was not working. So we needed to go to the main city and to expect to have a kind of workable internet. And I was fascinated by the students that I had because they were coming, most of them from poor family. We were in the only public university in Burkina Faso where we were teaching computer science, and they were really expecting a lot about their study and trying to improve their lives. So it was, for me, those 2 years was very interesting, and also worked in Burkina Faso to build computer centers in secondary cities. So mainly it was near high schools. And so it was building the computer center, so building the infrastructure. It was not the most difficult to part. What was more challenging, I guess, it was the capacity building and train the students and train everyone to use a computer and to see how it can be good for them. After those 2 years in Burkina Faso, I went to Mali, so just the country near Burkina Faso, and I spent also 2 years, and I was running an innovation lab. So it was an innovation lab with Malian and with volunteers coming from Europe or coming from the US. And it was fascinating because for 2 years, I built this small community of technicians, engineers, and so the American, Europeans, we have most of the time a strong art knowledge, were coming and were starting to live with Malians because we had a big apartment for everyone. And the Malians were bringing them to the village in a rural part of Mali. And and so it's how just mixing have a mixed community, they were able to build specific solutions. So for example, they were able to create an FM transmitters for the radio and build from scratch in Bamako with what we were able to find in the Bamako market. So we were able also to see that the computer that that we were buying from the outside was not working in Mali because their phones, their hard drives, they were working they were using too much electricity, and so engineers designed specific computers. We were able to work on solar panel and also working on without hard drive and without fan. So we were able to develop technology adapted to Africa. And so I guess other different experience, I realized how technology can empower people and really make a difference. I can give you an example that I remember one time I was in the north of Mali in Gao or near Gao, and we with colleagues and friends, and we went we were visiting a school, and one of the teachers at school told us that the capital of the US is New York. And we said, no, it's not New York, it is Washington. He told us, but how I can check it? I have no encyclopedia, I have nothing in that village. So I'm teaching with what I know. And we came back to Bamako and we said we need to find a solution for that problem. And we started to download the whole Wikipedia online, and we burned the Wikipedia on a CD. And we came back in the village and we started to give the Wikipedia offline to villagers. And it was the Moulin project, and now the project is named QX. And for example, it was a way to bring information to villagers to empower them. And for them, suddenly, these teachers was able to use our computer with Wikipedia. It was offline, and to see, okay, the capital of the US, it is Washington, and to able to teach to teach something true to the students. So it's how we were able to build also a kind of technology impacting really the human life. I was not thinking about human rights at the time. I am an engineer background, but I just realized after that what we were doing, it was about access to information, accessibility. So I guess it's really how I came to the interactions of technology development and human rights. So it was not did really on purpose, but because I have this interest for technology and then for other culture also.
Yeah, that's so impressive. We usually to miss the parts of the accessibilities in case of the developing of the new solutions and technologies. From your experiences, I learned a lot to be a touching the point with the some developing countries where who's the like exploring to be connected online to gain the benefits through that, even though it's very usual for the developed country, just
Mhm.
like in France and in Japan, but in other countries not. So that's a very important part to be connected together.
Of course.
So maybe the through that experiences you took several roles of the internet, and finally you get a job in ITU now.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to why did you choose the ITU to work, and what's the your current role on the project of the ITU?
Okay. It is a good question. I have been working with ITU for about 2 years, a bit more than 2 years. Before that, I worked for the French Agency for Development, and before that, I worked on a lot of different projects with funding from USAID or the World Bank, as you said. ITU, it's because it is a United Nation, and and I can expect that we can maybe try to build something good for most of the countries. So it was also my idea when I started to work at ITU. After, you need to know that ITU, we have three sectors. We have the R sector, it's about radio communication. We have the T sector, it's about standardization, telecommunication standardization. And we have the D sector, it's about telecommunication development. Me, I am in the T sector, so the sector developing standard. And when I started 2 years ago, um, one of my goals was really to try to embed into the standardization process privacy and data protections. And it was difficult. It was because there are there are two rights. They are very yeah. They are all they are discussed, and it's not always easy. So my scope has been open more, and we are talking more about human rights in general. And but for about 2 years, I didn't really have a very clear mandate about human rights. So I was talking internally about human rights. I was seeing uh, what can be important for member states or not. And for example, like the right to education, access to health. And so I was really bringing awareness for the ITU's members. And it came slowly, but then I was able, and I was not alone. For example, in October, the ITUT, we have been organizing the WTSA in New Delhi. So it was in October. It was with 3,600 delegates. And it is a WTSA. It's a big conference every 4 years to really to talk about the main policy about the ITUT sectors for the next 4 years. And so it was a meeting for 3 weeks. And it was the first time that in the big meetings we had about 10 human rights specialists. So they were part of of some delegations. And at the end of the day, they were able to come, the delegates were able to come with two important resolutions for human rights. One resolution talking about AI and trustworthy AI. And when we're talking about trust in the UN system, it's linked to human rights. And another resolution, it was about the metaverse, and it is the first time that we had a resolution where we are seeing the standardization of the metaverse need to respect human rights. So, and because we have been talking about that for 2 years, and then okay, we say we need to do something about that. And that means so last October we had this WTSA where we are starting to have clear mandates about human rights. And last May we had um, we had another important meeting in Geneva. All the member states asked to the ITUT sectors to start to see how we could embed human rights in in the standardization process. So I had about 6 months to start thinking, not alone, with also other people. So I did an internal survey, for example, of all the different study groups inside the ITUT. We have 10 study groups to try to understand their awareness about human rights. Also, I did a comparative study from the other standardization body to try to see how they are embedding human rights, and also we designed programs to train, to build the capacity of ITU's members um, to yes to build the capacity about embedding human rights into the standardization process. For example, from the survey, we know that 84% of the people working in the study groups consider human rights relevant to their work. But most of them, and 40%, they have a very low familiarity about that. So they have the feeling it is something important, after they don't know how to do it. They don't know. It's why training is something important. After they also can say with important demand, they say, okay, we would like to understand how other development bodies, standardization bodies are considering human rights. We need trainings. And because there are most of them, they are engineers and technicians, they say, okay, also we need to have maybe an AI tool to do a human rights risk assessment on the different standards. So they came with different ideas. But at the end of the day, we thought for quite a long time that the technician engineers were not open to human rights, but it's not that they are not open, they don't really understand what we are talking. And what we need to do is really to bridge the gap between the lawmakers and the engineers. And it's really what I'm trying to do. And when I was talking also with other standardization body, I realized that we have common challenges. We all have a fragmented approaches concerning human rights. We have that difficulty to translate human rights into technical term, technical language, and it's something that we really need to work. And I guess we need to take each different human right and see how it's going to be translated into technical terms for the engineers. And as I say, the technical communities have a low awareness about human rights, so it's something that we need to work on. And also concerning tools, we need maybe to develop shared tools with IEC, ISO, IEEE, IETF, to say how we could assess that the human rights impact in the standard that we are building, because really the aim of that is the standards that we want to create are going to be trustworthy, inclusive, and also are going to respect human rights to build a better digital economy in general, because the standard really are going to touch billions of people. And so it's how we are designing the technology. So if we are able to build a standard embedding human rights, that means that we can build also a technology a software who is going also to embed human rights. So that's why we also need to solve that problems and to ensure that we are embedding human rights into the standardization process.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. You work on the stakeholder corporations to find the best approach to deploy the embedded of the human rights, which is very critical.
Mhm.
And I think that's a quite interesting you mentioned about the human rights because the in past years maybe some of the technology experts is coding the ethics for
Mhm.
designing, but on our conversation in a few months ago, then you mentioned the change of the concept, the ethics to human rights. So could you elaborate what does it means of the shift from the ethics to the human rights and to the standardization? Then happy to hear about your opinion.
Yeah, of course, and it is a very, very good and important question. In the UN system, ethics is something different of human rights because ethics, it's a voluntary principle, it's a context dependent. For example, maybe in a specific uh, things, your ethics is going to be different of mine. So it's really linked also to the culture. So that human rights is something different. Human rights, they are universal and they are grounded in international law. It is a law. Human rights, it is a law. Ethics, it's really depending on the context. And when you are switching from ethics to human rights, that means you are going to come with a lot of different declarations and documents from the UN defining all the different human rights. After something that it's also quite important, it's coming from the UN General Assembly. Uh, the UN General Assembly in 2013 came with a specific resolution saying that we need to protect human rights set out the international human rights law, including in the digital context. And it's something that they said more than 10 years ago, and it's really changed a lot because for quite a long time, human rights, it was in the physical world. We were not really thinking about human rights into the digital world, you know? And they came with a specific law and they said, okay, now we need to apply human rights in the digital context. And that means that we are still working on defining what does that mean? What does that mean, human rights into the digital context, and how we are going to apply human rights in cyberspace. So it's mainly also the role of the Human Rights Council. It's also the role of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. They are working every day on promoting and protecting human rights. And also, I'm working with them to do that translations. And something, I guess, yeah, because also we are talking about privacy here, and we also need to realize that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is pretty old, from 1948, the Article 17 are talking about privacy. And so we have this Article 17 talking about privacy. We have another declaration from 10 years ago saying, okay, we need to apply also in digital context. So when you are talking about privacy, it is a law. It is not because you want, because I want. No, it is because it is the law. It is how we need to operate because it's a law at the UN system. It's going to be applied to all countries. And it is so that means we have legal obligations also. It's not just because I want, because you want. No, it is because it is legal. And Japan is part of the UN system, France, Switzerland, and we have a legal obligation to apply human rights into the digital context. How? We still sometimes it's difficult. I can understand the operationality of applying, but it is something important. That's why using the right term when you are using human rights, we have all the declaration with make it legal. When we are talking about ethics, it's really context dependent, and you cannot use any of this text to say it is ethics. No, we need to, even talking about digital rights, for example, some of my colleagues are talking about digital rights, but I'm trying to avoid that term because digital rights, there is no declarations about digital rights. All the declarations are about human rights in the digital context. And so using the proper word, if you're using human rights, you can push a legal obligation.
Thank you for the explanation. From that context, so what the role of the standardization? Because the a lot of context of the human rights, of course, in the UN has declarations, but in some regions has the different context of the human rights in terms of the nationalism as well. So what
Mhm.
the standardization is meaningful for the privacy and the human rights, and what the role of the standardization can contribute to the global dialogue?
Okay. And one more time, it's a very important question. The role of standardization, standards are not neutral. They shape how technology behave globally so they can influence privacy, dignity, equality, non-discrimination. I can give you an example. We built the basic infrastructure of the internet a long time ago. For example, TCP/IP, and we all know that we have datagram using TCP/IP to send our data on the network. IP addresses are visible by design. So privacy wasn't considered 30, 40, 50 years ago when they built that. I can understand that. I am an engineer myself, and I guess a long time ago, just being able to send a datagram from France to Japan was a huge challenge. So at that time, we were not considering privacy. We were just having a technical challenge. But that means today is still the case. It's still the case. And so we have the TCP/IP protocol. We cannot consider that there is no privacy by design. So it is an example. Encryption standard, for example. So when the encryption is weak, that means that enables surveillance, threatening confidentiality or freedom of expressions. And so we need to build on this type of protocol uh, to change them, to embed human rights, to embed privacy. It is not something easy to do that now. Because some countries, some big companies, they don't really want to change anything. Because for them, it's comfortable to have a TCP/IP where I can follow anyone. And so it's very difficult to find a consensus. And that means on the new standards that we are building, we need to embed human rights when we are building it. And to ensure that we have the privacy and to have something systemic when we are building the current standard, it can be on AI or whatever, because billions of users are going to be affected. TCP/IP, billions of users are affected by this standard and by this lack of privacy. And so embedding right upstream lead to trust, safety, and accountability by design. So it's not because we didn't do that in the past and because technically we were focused certainly on something else that we cannot do it now. And now we are still building standards. And we need to be unsure that human rights are embedded in the standards that we are building. And also, if we can fix the past standard, we can try to do it. After fixing something 10, 20 years ago, most of the time it is challenging because it is a standard and changing everything now. For example, the TCP/IP, but it can be something else. It can be about the DNS, and there is a bunch of different standards. They are not designed with privacy in mind. Changing it now, it's more difficult.
I see. Yeah, I agree that we should have the specific integrities in a context to have the even the different type of the perspective. So in this sense, you mentioned on your blog the describe is of the global corporations, which is one of the challenges for the standardization body. There is a lot of the different type of the stakeholders in that sense. As I mentioned, human rights, civil societies is speaking out, or other organization can dive into this dialogue. So what is necessary to achieve the global corporations? Because which is in the turmoils of the like global concession at this times in the different region. So what is necessary to achieve these goals?
It's it is we still have a lot of work to achieve a global cooperation, and it is something challenging because we are working with different stakeholders, so they can be government, private sectors, academia, civil society, and most of them they have different priorities. And I can just take the government. We know that different government can have different priorities concerning privacy. It's going to be the same considering the private sectors. So that need, and it's what we are doing at ITU, is try to build a consensus. And a consensus, that means that that means a dialogue. It's what we are doing in the UN, to have all these different stakeholders coming and talking to each other to find this consensus, and trying also to build trust. And the ITU, it's all organization. We have 160 years this year. We started 160 years ago um, to standardize the telegraph, for example. And the idea, and it's still the idea of the ITU, is to be a platform of trust for all the different stakeholders to design this consensus. After, we have other platforms, the World Summit for Information Society, WSIS, for example, it's a multi-stakeholder platform. And one more time, we are using this platform to talk about human rights and how we could embed, and so to try to be influential for national government, for the private sector, for the academia, civil society. The IGF, Internet Governance Forum, it's one of the IGF happen in Japan, for example. It's a very interesting platform, also to discuss human rights and to try to find a consensus, and to come maybe with a specific framework, or maybe a specific tool how to embed human rights into the standardization process. And today also we have the Global Digital Compact. So it is a UN global framework. And one more time, we are talking about human rights, and you are talking about human rights in the standardization process. So that means that the global, one more time, the Global Digital Compact, for example, it is an obligation for the country, for the UN system, to work on embedding human rights into the standardization process. So achieving global cooperation, it is something difficult, of course. It is finding a consensus, but we have the tools today to have these kind of discussions, and sometimes it has been working. When we have the resolution saying we need to respect human rights in the digital context, uh, it is a global cooperation, and so we are slowly moving on, and on this, and the stakeholder model, it is something important. It is something important because we need to hear voices from everyone, because at the internet, it's not just a business of government, of private sector. When I started to use the internet a long time ago, it was built by user in academia. And without the government, without really the private sector at that time. And so I was feeling that I was part of the internet. I had my own server when I was teenager, and I was hosting my own website. I was part of of that. And today it's only big corporation. The internet is big corporations, and I guess the users still need to to be part of the internet. And for that, we need really to push the stakeholder model and to say, okay, the internet is not only a business of government and private sectors. Civil society, academia, and user in general are part of the internet. We are all the internet. So I guess it's something that we need to keep in mind and and uh, and keep also that the universal human rights are a foundation of the internet. So and the global digital compact can help, for example, on this.
Yeah, thank you for the mention. The very important talks about the internet is for everybody can participate in the dialogues on the like to seek the more safer, the more useful the any kind of the discussion has been included of the global corporations to make a sustain of this internet environment. So yeah, that's we totally agree with your ideas. So, lastly, I wanted to hear about your own message. That's because the on your blogs that you mentioned about it, the significance is to involve the different stakeholders, and you have a very strong missions and the human rights through your speech on this interview. So that's very interesting to hear about your last message. So could you share about the insight, Olivier, in last?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I can wrap up a bit. So really what I'm trying to do is to ensure that global technical standards respect human rights standards shape how billions of people experience technology. So embedding privacy right by design, it is something essential for trustworthy digital ecosystem. And so I guess it's a bit of the conclusion after concerning the listener, the user of the internet. We are all using the internet every day today, and I guess that all of us need to pay attention to privacy in your daily use of technology. And so it can be choosing a strong password, updating our devices, checking application permission, using secure messaging, avoiding suspicious links or thinking twice when I'm going to share personal data. So it's all the small things that we can do every day to try also to protect our privacy. It's not just a business of UN or government or a private company. No, it's also my business. It's my business to protect my life online, my privacy online, to protect my data, and to ensure that the data that I have on my computer or on my phone are going to be my data. And after, of course, sometimes it can be difficult, but just doing small things like checking application permission or password uh, can be important. Can be important for to do for all of us today.
Yeah, thank you, Olivier. That was very helpful for the listeners to protect their own privacy and be secure their own network. So yeah, that's very good, nice. And again, I cordially appreciate that you've been participating on this interview and sharing your experiences and your thoughts, and which is very primary for us to look at the what the standardization is doing. And many listeners should be interested in participating in the ways of the standardization. So yeah, very appreciated to be joining this interview. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks a lot for the invitation and for all your questions. You know, everything was very interesting, and I hope yes, it's going to maybe to give more clarity about the standardization process and what we can do also to protect our own privacy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.